Ed Husic and Anne Ali have accused Israel of war crimes through collective punishment in the Palestinian territories. Do you agree with them?
Well, I think the point that Ed and Anne and others have made is identical to the point that the Prime Minister made yesterday. And that point is this. An innocent civilian life on one side of a wall is not worth any more or any less than an innocent civilian life on the other side of the wall. And what we have said consistently is what we are seeing in this conflict in recent days is a devastating loss of innocent lives. That is being felt, of course, in that part of the world, but also around our communities, around our country and around the world as well. We expect international law to be respected. That means humanitarian laws and the rules governing conflict as well. And our hearts are with the civilians on either side of this conflict who are caught up in the violence and the bloodshed that we've seen in recent days. We're going to go across the front here. Michael, then Ron.
Are you concerned that conflict in the Middle East means inflation could be higher for longer than both Treasury and the Reserve Bank are currently forecasting?
Well, that's certainly the point that Governor Bullock was making yesterday. And obviously, when you've got conflict in that part of the world, the risk is upward pressure on global oil prices, and Australians would feel that at the bowser. I think it's important to recognise that since around the middle of the year, from about June, I believe, from memory, we have seen global oil producers ramp down their supply, and that has pushed up oil prices, and that's why we've seen the petrol price spike here in Australia, including up into the high $2.30s around there. And so we are already seeing elevated oil prices as a consequence of decisions taken by suppliers, and this does risk putting additional upward pressure on the global oil price. We expect in next week's inflation figures that we will see some of the first part of that, elevated global oil prices reflected in the CPI, and that's a point really that Governor Bullock was making. In addition to that, since then, obviously, conflict in the Middle East introduces an element of uncertainty into the global economy because it runs the risk of putting upward pressure on oil prices. We're going to go Ron, then Katina.
Treasurer, the High Court yesterday says that the imposition of road user charging for electric vehicles lays only with the Commonwealth now. States and territories can't introduce it. How are you going to address the decline in the fuel excise that's going to occur over the next decade and deal with that infrastructure spending shortfall?
Oh, look, we'll work through the issues in a considered and a methodical way. You know, obviously we acknowledge the decision of the High Court. These decisions and these issues are complex, so we'll take the time to consider them. We'll seek all of the relevant advice and we'll have more to say in due course. I think Australians know that we are big supporters of electric vehicles. That's why we've got the tax cuts to encourage more people to take up EVs. It's why we're also committed to the fuel efficiency standard. So we want to work with the Victorians and with the other states and territories on policy relating to electric vehicles. You know, clearly the decision taken by the High Court has implications for that, for the state tax mix. We'll work through these issues in the usual considered and methodical way. We'll go Katina and then there.
Treasurer, just back on the jobs figures, as you say, welcome drop, but it seems to be underpinned by people dropping out of the labour force completely. What do you think is driving that?
Well, the participation rate is still near record highs, but it has come off a little bit in these numbers. And similar to what I said to your former colleague up the front here, you know, there are signs around the edges of these numbers that we're seeing the expected softening in the labour market. But overall, to have the unemployment rate at 3.6%, to have a record-setting performance for a new government in terms of jobs created, you know, we enter this period of weaker economic growth brought about by global economic uncertainty and the impact of higher rates. We enter all of that from a position of strength. We see that in the overall rate, even as we acknowledge some of the softer components elsewhere in the numbers.
You just said Ed Husic's comments were identical to the Prime Minister's, but neither the Prime Minister or Foreign Minister have accused Israel of carrying out collective punishment, which is a war crime. Can we just be very clear, does your government believe Israel is carrying out collective punishment of Palestinians?
Well, a couple of things about that. I mean, the point that I was making is that when the Prime Minister said yesterday that all human lives matter, and Ed Husic said today, and I've repeated today, that we can't see innocent lives on one side of this as worth any more or less than innocent lives on the other side of this, we are all making the same point about the need for innocent civilian lives to be respected and protected, consistent with humanitarian law. I'm not going to get into parsing the language used by colleagues. We all choose our own ways to describe our reactions to what's happening over there in the Middle East. I've done that a moment ago. Ed did that this morning as well. And I think whether it's Ed Husic, the Prime Minister, Anna Lee, Josh Burns, myself, we are all incredibly concerned about the violence and the bloodshed. We've all condemned the actions of the terrorist group Hamas, and we've all expressed our concern for the loss of human life.